never seen something like me.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Walking with Walfinch. I am joined today by Craig Jones, the Chief Exec of the ROS. Thank you for joining us today, Craig.
Very glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
What on earth is the ROS?
Well, the Royal Osteoporosis Society is the UK's charity for people with osteoporosis. Half of women over 50 will suffer this condition and a fifth of men. We're there to make sure they can get on top of it. We want to prevent it from happening as well, and we can do that with getting them an early diagnosis. We campaign for them and we sponsor research too.
Wow, I mean it's a tall ask. Half of women over the age of 50?
Yeah, and people are amazed. They are really surprised to hear that it affects half of women over 50, but that's a message we always start with, because that shows how, if you're a woman in particular, 40 to 50, perimenopausal, maybe it's time to start thinking about bone health, but also a fifth of men over 52.
Really? And that's super interesting. I think just before we started recording, we were talking about how it really impacts every touch point that we have at Walfinch. So if I think about care workers and that age group is really, that age group, it's 80% female, our workforce largely. Our care workers, our clients, their families, I mean, it's a really sort of impactful thing, I think.
Well, a company like yours is exactly the right type of organisation for us to be talking to, because as you say, your staff are of that age where bone health will start to become more important for them. If they start thinking about bone health in the 40 to 50 type age, which is where they can tend to have their first broken bone, their first fracture, if they check their risk, they can get an assessment much sooner. Obviously, your clients are going to be in that age group who are very much affected by this, but it's a bit of a hidden illness and it gets missed, and people are breaking bones repeatedly without anybody thinking, hold on, they could have this progressive condition and we need to get them an assessment and access to medication and lifestyle advice too.
Wow, so someone in their 40s, how do they prevent it?
Well, all of our bone health, for all of us, peaks in our 30s. So it's kind of downhill from there, really. And that's when it's really important to do things like weight-bearing exercise, vitamin D, particularly during the winter months. Cutting down on things like smoking and alcohol is important, as it is for lots of other conditions. But the really big thing is, if our mother or our dad had a broken hip, we're going to be at greater risk ourselves.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's mostly genetic in terms of risk. So just being aware of it, knowing your family history. If you break a bone, you should get an assessment. And luckily, if you do, then the medications are really, really strong. They're safe, they're effective, and you can stop further breaks. Wow,
that is super interesting. I think, the fact that it peaks in your 30s is quite a sort of daunting piece of information, actually, isn't it? And so is there something that you can do with that, post that age? If you're in your 40s and you just started thinking about your health in a more holistic way?
Completely. It's never too early and it's never too late. So if people are listening and they're in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, it's still worth starting. So, still do the weight-bearing exercise. We can really keep bones stronger for longer if we do that. The vitamin D is really important as well. But if people are suffering from osteoporosis, which, as I say, tends to be hidden, we really want to get them a diagnosis before the first break, ideally, at the very least after their first break. And then with the medication and the lifestyle advice, they can control it, they can beat it, and they can live the life they deserve.
Wow. And one of the things, obviously we've started working together, and I'm very excited by that, because at Walfinch we're really interested in wellness, but in a much more holistic way. So most home care or care within the sector in the UK is very much focused on that, providing something, personal care, end-of-life care, complex care. But the things that I'm really particularly interested in is just wellness as a whole. And we talk about time to thrive and thriving in your later years. And I feel like it's a really wonderful connection as a result of that.
I really think it is, and I've read your website and I really like the bits about not just maintaining quality of life, but actually improving quality of life. And we know that if we're to get out there and raise public awareness around this condition, which is so low, we're a small charity, this is a big condition. As we all live longer, there's going to be more and more osteoporosis. We know that we can't do our jobs properly unless we work with partners who share our goals and want to achieve the same things. So all the things that you talk about in terms of improving lifestyle, in terms of improving health, is just music to our ears, really. And through organisations like Walfinch, we can reach the people who need that prior warning that this could be a real risk to their quality of later life.
I mean, it's super interesting. So how long has the Royal Osteoporosis Society been around for?
Since 1986, so we are going into our 40th anniversary next year.
Wow, gosh. And if I remember correctly, when we first started talking, you were telling me that Queen Camilla was a patron initially.
Yes.
And so how did that all come to be?
She is. So Her Majesty the Queen is our president. She's the biggest supporter we've got. Her mum had osteoporosis and her grandmother.
Gosh.
They both suffered really badly with it. And the Queen, before she was the Queen, met my predecessor, the lady who set up the charity, and she said, it's not right that a condition whose effects are largely preventable has such low public awareness. And she was the first celebrity to throw her weight behind the charity.
Wow.
And of course, fast forward 20 years, she's now the Queen, and she's been incredibly loyal to us and incredibly good to us.
How wonderful. And so who else have you got involved in the charity?
Well, we've got academics, we've got great professors of bone health on our board, we've got 23,000 public members, they're very important as well. We've got a few other celebrities as ambassadors, but the thing we're doing more of is to work with businesses. So something I'm really proud of is that I had the idea of setting up this group of business ambassadors, realising that really if we connect with the public through businesses, it's a massive signal booster. And you're our newest business ambassador.
And thank you. I'm really excited to be on.
And just having you on the list is giving us such optimism that we can get through to really thousands more people than we would otherwise.
I think it's a really interesting idea that you've had there, because it just kind of cracks a whole different segment. And I think there's a huge connection there between care, preventative care, and this issue that we're trying to tackle. And so a lot of your work, from my understanding, is around lobbying the government and raising the profile. Yes. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you do with that and how that looks on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, well, 2/3 of people with the condition don't know they've got it, which is
that right?
Yeah,
2/3?
2/3, yeah. So the vast majority of people with this life-threatening condition, because uncontrolled osteoporosis will result in a hip fracture. A quarter of people die from that within a year. Yet despite that, 2/3 of people are missing this safe, highly effective treatment that totally transforms their outcomes. So we've realised that as a small charity, smallish, we've got 70 staff, we can't service deliver our way out of that problem. We've got 12 helpline nurses. They're always on the phone. They're always there to answer calls. But really, I could put 10 times more helpline nurses on the helpline, but it still won't be enough because the NHS is systematically letting down 2/3 of people. So we've been raising that issue through the Sunday Express and the Mail on Sunday and other media. And the current government's promised to roll out early diagnosis centres to every area by 2030, and that's the kind of change we're looking for.
Wow. And so what would those early diagnosis centres look like, and what would you do? I'm going along, I'm 38 right now, I go along in a few years' time and say, right, okay, diagnose me. What would I go through?
Well, the best thing is you wouldn't go to them, they'd come to you,
okay.
And that's exactly what we need. Because right now, people are breaking bones, they go to A&E, they're fixed up and forgotten about. Nobody thinks to assess them for whether they've got the condition going on underneath. And, those people are going to be going home, they're going to be at serious risk of another fracture. They'll be back in, and suddenly you've got this revolving door in hospitals of fracture patients coming in and out. It's the second biggest filler of hospital beds. These early diagnosis centres, called fracture liaison services, systematically assess everybody who's broken a bone. They check the records, they call you up, they bring you in, they give you an assessment to see whether you might have the condition. If you do, they put you on medication, and they follow up afterwards to help you get the best out of that regime.
And the treatment is medication, it's physio, what does the treatment look like?
Well, it's mainly therapies, so drug therapies. Some are injectable, some are oral. There's quite a wide range. Some of those slow the loss of bone. Others help you grow bone density back.
Right.
Some of the newer ones, they're very exciting. And then you've got the lifestyle advice we talked about, and the combination of those things totally transforms people's outcomes. So you're not going to get people dying of broken hips. You're going to get people living the kind of life they deserve to live.
Yeah.
You know, free, independent, you know, all the things that you're trying to promote for your clients.
Yeah.
We want that for everybody.
It's really interesting. I was reading something about your muscle mass in your legs and having a direct relation to all-cause mortality. But actually, a lot of those things are so interconnected here, aren't they? So if you don't have strong legs, you're more likely to fall. If you suffer from something like osteoporosis, you know, that will just become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
But if you try to omit that, you'll be lifting heavier weights from a younger age and building that, and at the same time building that bone density.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely right. And you know, we want people's bone density to peak as high as possible. And if we're not sort of giving people the falls prevention advice, that's very important. You know, we want fewer falls. I know lots of people involved in social care are thinking about this and how to stop falls. But of course, if you've got osteoporosis, a small stumble could mean a serious fracture that completely transforms their life. It's in fact worse than that. And with the fact that coughs and sneezes, hugs from grandchildren can be enough to shatter people's bones.
Awful.
That's what we're fighting against. But we've got these therapies which can strengthen bones and protect people. We just need to find the people who are at risk and step in early.
I think that's so interesting, that concept of finding people that are at risk, because often we just look at our grandparents and think, no, that's just part of getting older.
Yeah,
but a lot of these are things that we can fix, you know, we can hold on to for longer and just change the way someone lives.
Well, that's right, and I think a lot of this is about I'm going to say ageism, but you know, stereotypes about older people. You know, the road sign with two people with walking sticks crossing the road, and of course that road sign's meant to say, you know, older people, beware. But if they're both hunched over, and when we look at that, we see spinal fractures.
Yeah.
These people have a compressed spine because they've broken lots of bones in their spine. Which is a medical issue. You know, you give people the drug therapies to stop the breaks, and you don't have the spinal fractures. But we see that sign and we immediately just think age, and that puts it into the category of inevitability. It's going to happen. This is what we have to look forward to, which is completely wrong. There's no reason why people in their 70s, 80s can't live the full independent life they deserve.
Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely true. My dad is in his early 70s and hits the gym, travels on, just is very kind of independent, touch wood. I look at my father-in-law who's just turned 80, again, sort of plays golf and, and all that kind of thing. And it's just about how you live, I suppose, right? And it's about kind of not believing in that, well, actually I've hit this number and that's it, it's over for me.
Yeah, completely. So my mother-in-law is a bit like your relatives. She showed me all the Zumba class dances that she does, and she does it to kind of Rihanna songs and Beyonce songs, and you think, this is how I want to be in my 70s. But if you've got osteoporosis, it's a real threat to all of that happening. One of our volunteers is 42, and at the age of 42, she was told by her doctor she has the bones of an 80-year-old because this condition had weakened them so much. So, of course, when she has a stumble or a cough, she's going to break a bone. And then when she does, it's months of recovery. She has to have her home totally decked out in the kind of thing you'd expect to see in somebody in their 70s and 80s.
Really?
Yeah, and she feels it really deeply, and she feels that she's sort of been denied the kind of life that she could and should have. So we want to stop that kind of thing from happening and make sure everybody can grow up like your relatives and my mother-in-law. Yeah,
I mean, it's really quite sort of heartbreaking, actually, isn't it? Because you think, gosh, 42 is just such
terrible.
It's no age, is it? But it's so impactful. And if I think about the work we've done with, our older clients over the years, and think about how debilitating that is, a broken bone, a broken hip, and actually often people will break a hip and then they'll have various other things that will come out of that just because of their lack of mobility. And it's a huge problem, actually.
It is, and broken hips are the worst of all, really, when it comes to this condition. And if you do nothing about osteoporosis, eventually you'll have a broken hip. That is the event that is the turning point for a lot of people. And the loss of agency afterwards, the loss of independence, sometimes, does result in that, as you know, they call it deconditioning, and then eventually, for some people, death.
Yeah. Wow. So one of the things that we do at Walfinch is Thrive Clubs, and what that means is they're community clubs that are free, donation based, and there's personal trainers, there's yoga teachers, art classes, whatever it might be, just a community activity, usually centered around wellness, and often physical. And one of the things that we're talking to our franchisees about is basically getting these clubs to be centres for us to talk about bone health, to talk about increasing bone density, to raise money for the Royal Osteoporosis Society. So it's a very exciting opportunity, I think, because the two things just are so connected.
Yeah, they really are. And, it just thrills us how there are businesses who are thinking exactly the same as we are. In other words, giving people access to the kind of community that they need, the services that they need. The example that you've just mentioned is really inspiring. I wish we heard of more of that. Because when you bring people together like that, they'll talk about things like bone health. Yeah. And thank you for talking to them for us about bone health as well. You're one of the first businesses who are making this a thing and making it their thing.
Yeah.
We're really grateful because, like I say, a small charity can't do it that ourselves, but you're a big signal booster to the public.
Well, we hope so. I mean, it's certainly something that I'm particularly interested in. I've always been interested in, bodybuilding and weightlifting and all of that, and actually then the science behind it. And a lot of that, we had a bodybuilder on this show actually not that long ago, and he spent a lot of time talking about bone health. And we had a GP talking about bone density and how ways to kind of help increase that. And it was really interesting because actually I think it's coming onto people's radars more and more naturally.
I really hope so. We hope that we're at the beginning of something and we can give this condition a moment. And when I say give it a moment, I mean with a view to beating it and overcoming it for good. But a moment like menopause has had.
Yes.
If you think back 10 years, nobody talks about menopause. Women felt that it was uncomfortable. They felt a little embarrassed talking about it. Women tell me I'm okay to talk about this and they tell me their experience. And what they say is that osteoporosis is exactly there. It's associated with frailty, vulnerability, and it's been ignored and brushed under the carpet. Yeah. But now, because of the menopause campaigners, every responsible workplace has a menopause policy, and they've taken it right into the mainstream. People like Davina McCall. We'd like to think that we're 5 years behind, and we need other people like Walfinch to help us do it, but we feel like we're about to push this into on the national stage where it deserves to be.
Absolutely, and I, certainly will do everything I can to help. So Craig, tell me a little bit about yourself personally. Yeah. Why the Royal Osteoporosis Society? What were you doing before this? How did this come to be?
Well, I was involved in health through board roles, so I was on the Royal College of Anaesthetists board, and NHS Blood and Transplant. I was on one of the organ donation committees there. I was doing all this health stuff outside of work, and I thought, I should really make my day job health as well. Yeah. So started that in 2020, and since then we've been doing all we can to publicise the condition, to influence at the highest levels, and we're beginning to make stuff happen, like this government pledge on early diagnosis clinics.
And so what do you do in your personal life to help sort of increase bone density, and is it something that you think about?
I think about it on myself, definitely. I think about it in terms of family members. So my parents are getting into their, I suppose, approaching their 70s. So maybe it's time to start thinking about them too. And I suppose kids as well, really, because ideally we'd make bone health a thing for people of all ages. Because while it's never too late to start thinking about bone health, it's also never too early, since our bone health peaks in our 30s.
Yeah, and absolutely, I think that is so true. And just actually, one of the things I've been thinking about a lot when I've been training recently has been about bone health, and just thinking, load-bearing exercise, which I'm doing anyway, but I'm doing with a fresh thinking now, which is not something that was the case historically. Actually, I was lifting just to build muscle mass, but actually now one of the things I am thinking about is, how do I make my joints and bones and hip stronger for later, and so on, stronger for longer, as you very eloquently put earlier.
It's the right thing to do, definitely. And it's also important when somebody's broken a bone. So if somebody's got osteoporosis and they break a bone, particularly if it's their first, they immediately think, how do I exercise safely?
Yeah.
And in fact, a lot of them think, well, I can't exercise at all, because if I have a physio, if I have anybody manipulating me in any way or take on those movements myself, I might make it worse. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that's the opposite of what we need people doing. We do need people training even after a fracture, and there are ways to exercise safely for broken bones caused by osteoporosis. People can check our website out and find out what those actions and moves are. But we'd like to do a sort of digital journey for people who've just broken a bone and show them in great detail the kind of safe exercises they can do, because shutting down is actually the worst thing you can do.
I expect, yes. And so, talking sort of headlines, what are your top 3 hacks, tips for somebody who is looking at increasing bone density and starting to think about it in a really kind of positive way?
Well, the first is to use our risk checker. The Queen launched our risk checker in 2022. It's a 5-minute test that asks a series of questions. It'll tell people if you're at serious risk of osteoporosis. 500,000 people have used it to date, so we are cooking on that. We've got a lot of people using it, and 60,000 of them have got an early diagnosis because they check their risk.
Amazing. Okay, so over 10% have got an early diagnosis as a result of this.
Yeah, that's right. I should say that we've deliberately targeted the digital advertising at people we think are going to be at high risk. So it's not representative of the population as a whole.
Okay.
We targeted it at women aged 45 to 60.
Okay.
So that's the first thing, check your risk. The second is, have a look at weight-bearing exercise. And by the way, walking is a great example of that. So even though it doesn't feel like it right now, we are doing something that's good for our bones, and the more of that, the better.
I'm lugging quite a lot around with me right now, so it's 100 kilos that I'm having to lug around. It's going to help increase bone density. I'm absolutely weight-bearing.
Yeah, so we're sort of multitasking. We're staving off osteoporosis as well. And then the third thing would be just be aware of that family link. So if mum or dad had a fracture, particularly a broken hip, that's when you really need to check your risk. And if you have osteoporosis, whether it took you a long time to find it out, as it so often does, or whether you had a better experience, please think about sons and daughters, getting them checking their risk as well, particularly daughters.
Thank you so much. And anything else that you'd like to get out there, Craig?
I think just to thank you, really. The team at Walfinch are exactly what we hoped for in terms of supporters in the private sector whose clients are exactly the kind of people who might be at high risk of osteoporosis, whose staff members are likely to potentially be at higher risk as well. So just by working with you, you give us a huge boost in terms of raising public awareness. You share our goals as well. You share our values. And I'm just so grateful that you're part of our team now.
And absolutely, I feel absolutely the same way, and I speak to everyone at Walfinch that we are super excited about strengthening bones all around the country, and thank you so much.
Yes.
Absolute pleasure. And see you soon. And thank you for tuning in to another episode of Walking with Walfinch. Until next time.